The Self-Discipline Manual: How to Achieve Every Goal You Set Using Willpower, Self-Control, and Mental Toughness. Written by Peter Hollins. Narrated by Russell Newton. It's lunchtime, and you're faced with a choice: a nice healthy salad, or a diet-destroying cheeseburger and fries. You've probably encountered dozens of such choices today alone and made your decision, for better or worse. But what exactly allowed you to act with self-control, or, if you didn't, why was it so easy to succumb to temptation? In the chapters that follow, we'll be looking closely at what self-discipline is, why it's so important to a successful life, and how we can cultivate it day by day. We'll be looking at dozens of different approaches, techniques, philosophies, and perspectives to help us become self-determined, resilient, and autonomous individuals. But throughout, there are really only two main themes we'll be exploring. 1, self-awareness. 2, conscious action. Being mindful and awake to what is unfolding in our hearts and minds is half the battle, but the other half is deliberately deciding to do something about it. That's why throughout this book, you'll be asked to pause periodically and either 1, look within and ask questions to guide self-awareness. 2, take action right here, right now. Though the material we'll cover is evidence-based and makes good sense, the truth is it means nothing if it's not weighed against your own genuine experience and unless it's brought to life in action. Look out for prompts to be aware and take action. They'll allow you to reflect on the material in your own life, as well as put the ideas to good use by changing your behavior, even if that's only in small ways. The good news is that no matter where you're starting from today, it is possible to develop better self-discipline, to master your emotions, and to gain a stronger and more resilient sense of purpose. Let's dive in. The biology of self-control. Let's start with the body. Though it's tempting to think in abstract terms only, researchers are uncovering evidence that willpower, control, and self-discipline all have the same biological basis in the brain. If we can understand the brain regions responsible for self-control and decision-making, then perhaps we can work with our brain to make better decisions. In 2017, scientists at the European Molecular Biology Laboratory conducted experiments that revealed a link between two important parts of the brain, the brainstem and the prefrontal cortex. The researchers believe that these two brain regions are involved in regulating instinctual behavior as well as self-control, a little like the proverbial angel on one shoulder and devil on the other. The prefrontal cortex acts like a brake on the impulsiveness of the brainstem. The experiment began with observing mice who were bullied. Really. So-called social defeat in mice, i.e., being bullied by other mice, resulted in a weakening of the neural connections between the prefrontal cortex and the brainstem in the brains of the mice. Those mice with weaker connections then behaved more defensively. The scientists could also induce the same fear-based response in the mice through the use of certain drugs instead of social defeat. In these mice, too, the connection between the brain parts was disrupted. Now, you may be wondering what scared mice have to do with what you choose for lunch. The connection between the prefrontal cortex and the brainstem is what allows us to regulate an instinctual response, i.e., to fight against our instincts. So, for example, when you're standing on a high diving board with all your friends cheering you on from beneath, you experience genuine fear, but you push against this and take the leap anyway. Your more rational prefrontal cortex is helping to override the survival-based fear coming from your brainstem. Without that connection, the fear signals coming from your brainstem may convince you to climb down off the diving board. Likewise, the impulse to eat the cheeseburger and fries may be dampened by the more rational prefrontal cortex that may tell you, that's bad for you. And besides, you ate an hour ago. Interestingly, Scientists noted that in difficult, tempting, or fear-provoking situations, the amygdala is still active. Since this part of the brain is responsible for our emotional responses, this means we still feel the fear, for example, or the desire. So even if we can overrule impulsive behavior, we still experience feeling nervous, afraid, or tempted. This is neurological evidence for the saying, courage is not the lack of fear, but feeling the fear and doing it anyway. The researchers' conclusions were that our inbuilt instinctual urges and impulses are important, but that human beings still need to find ways to control, moderate, and regulate those impulses. Furthermore, this balance of control is something we can actually observe playing out in the brain, i.e., it's not merely a question of abstract willpower. Consider another experiment that tells us something interesting about the biology of self-control. Neuroscientists at the California Institute of Technology gathered 37 people who said they'd had a hard time sticking to diets and maintaining a healthy weight. For the experiment, they were asked to fast for 3 hours, and then the scientists took an fMRI reading of their brain to observe their brain activity. The participants were then shown 50 pictures of food and asked to rate each picture on a 5-point tastiness scale. In this case, assume that tasty means unhealthy and not exactly something you'd choose if you were on a diet, like the participants claimed to be. Next, the researchers noted which foods were rated around 2.5 on the scale, or neutral. They then presented this food and each of the other 49 options, and the participants were told to choose between them. Half the participants chose the tastier option and half chose the more neutral option. Importantly, the fMRI scans revealed that those who picked the healthier food had elevated activity in, you guessed it, the prefrontal cortex, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, to be exact. It was as though the scientists saw in real time the activity of the part of the brain that chips in to say, nah, you shouldn't eat that. Try something healthier instead. Todd Hare, lead author of the science paper, claimed that one of the differences between people who are good at using self-control and those who are poor at self-control might be the ability to activate the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. We can conclude then that self-control, discipline, and the ability to mitigate our instincts is actually a function of a very specific brain region, the prefrontal cortex. This is fascinating news, but it does pose another question. How can we strengthen the prefrontal cortex? Do we have self-control because our prefrontal cortex is strong? Or do we strengthen the prefrontal cortex because we have self-control? In the chapters that follow, we'll be considering the answers to these questions, but we'll also be looking at the question of self-control and self-discipline from many different angles and lenses: your habits, your values and principles, your physical health and well-being, your thought processes, your background and history, your personality, your culture and family, your environment, your attitudes and beliefs, your emotions, even your spiritual well-being. Neuroscientists can observe brain activity and make inferences about its function, but just because self-control has a biological basis, it doesn't mean that's all there is to it. If you take a deep breath and choose the salad over the cheeseburger, is it because of your brain? Or is it because of your learned behaviors, your mindset, or your social environments? The answer is, it's all these things. Be aware, as you start this book, what are your expectations about the changes you'll need to make? How do you frame the issue of self-discipline? Where do you get these ideas? We begin with the brain, but that's only the beginning. What we learn from the two experiments above is that self-discipline is a 360-degree phenomenon, and that what we experience on the emotional, behavioral, and cognitive levels is simultaneously played out on the physical and neurochemical level. Understanding delayed gratification. Let's move on from cheeseburgers to marshmallows, specifically the now famous marshmallow test. In the late 1960s, Walter Mischel was interested in the idea of self-control, and he had a particular question in mind. Does the ability to delay gratification influence future success in life? Mischel took preschool children and sat each one in a room at a table in front of a marshmallow. A researcher then told the child that they were leaving the room, and that meant the child had two choices. One, wait a little while for the researcher to return without eating the marshmallow, whereupon they'd be given more marshmallows. Or two, if they absolutely couldn't wait, they could eat the marshmallow, but then they wouldn't receive any more. In this case, they'd ring a bell and the researcher would return. The researchers were in another room recording just how long each child could delay gratification, if at all. Fast forward a few years, and the researchers discovered that those children who could wait the longest before gobbling the marshmallow showed better academic performance by the time they were 15 years old. In other words, the time delay was a reliable predictor of future success. It wasn't just school success either. The children able to delay gratification had lower aggression, more social responsibility, higher confidence, and better overall self-efficacy. According to Mischel, the cognitive skills that allowed the preschoolers to resist the marshmallow were the same ones that enabled more general self-control and self-regulation in all of life. Mischel later expounded on a hot and cool theory where the emotional and instinctual reaction, go, was kept in check by the rational, slower, and more neutral reaction, no. This may sound not unlike the relationship between the brainstem and the prefrontal cortex. It doesn't matter if your goal is to lose a few pounds, save money for something important, or quit procrastinating. Knowing how to delay gratification and check impulsiveness is a key skill that affects your entire life. It's especially important when you consider that the world is often set up to create, sustain, and reward addictive and impulsive behavior while downplaying long-term reward. See the entire advertising industry. Delayed gratification is the ability to delay the fulfillment of an impulse for immediate satisfaction in favor of a reward sometime in the future. The term is often used along with concepts of self-regulation, discipline, and self-control. According to Baumeister et al.'s theory of self-regulation, there are 5 areas in which we can delay gratification. 1. Food, e.g., having a smaller meal rather than a bigger one today to avoid becoming overweight in many years' time. 2. Addiction and physical pleasures, e.g., choosing not to feel the joy of a particular substance right now so you can enjoy health and freedom in the long run. 3. Social interactions, e.g., foregoing a party so you can work or study, even though it's obviously less fun to do so. 4. Money, e.g., foregoing the pleasure of spending on little things today so that you can afford to retire earlier in the future. 5. Achievement, turning away from momentary distractions to keep focusing on the long-term goal, even though it's not very exciting or rewarding. As you can see, inhibitory and self-regulating behavior kind of goes against the grain. It's the ability to consciously choose to feel less good in the moment so that you can feel better in the future. The ability to value the future over the present takes maturity, discipline, and control, since grasping pleasure in the moment is often the default mode. Our species has evolved to seek immediate gratification for a good reason. Tomorrow's not guaranteed, and our survival may hinge on us seizing opportunities for pleasure in the here and now. But left to its own devices, this mechanism can result in impulsive and self-destructive behavior. At the same time, constantly delaying gratification and inhibition isn't always the best strategy either. There may well be times when it's better to accept $50 today instead of $500 in 10 years, especially if, for example, you have reason to believe you won't be around in 10 years. But if you are able to consistently eat well, turn down damaging addictions, make smart choices that contribute to your long-term development, invest money, and habitually avoid distractions, it's hard to imagine what goal you couldn't achieve. So, the battle between the prefrontal cortex and the brainstem comes down to two things: impulse versus conscious choice, pleasure in the moment versus reward in the future. Being a slave to instinct versus mastering it for your own needs. You only need to consider how high the global rates are for mental health issues, obesity, addiction, divorce, and debt to see how rare it is to choose something other than instant gratification. What does impulsivity look like in your life? Be aware. So be honest. How impulsive are you? How would you score on the marshmallow test? Don't be so quick to assume that you have no issues with self-discipline merely because certain tasks are not a problem for you. The lack of self-discipline and ability to delay gratification can show up in many different ways in different people's lives. For example, Vicky doesn't like to have to compromise, preferring to simply end friendships if they become too much hard work. Her relationships suffer too, because she constantly chooses the instant gratification of starting a new fun relationship rather than sticking through thick and thin with the person she's already with. Consequently, no relationship lasts longer than a year, and ultimately, she feels lonely and aimless. Jaden has a wife and loves her, but unable to temper his addiction to pornography, he finds his lack of impulse control eroding the trust in his marriage. On top of this, his addiction to social media and the instant gratification of the online world means he seldom has the patience or attention span to connect in deeper, more meaningful ways with his wife. In time, he loses the feeling of genuine closeness with her. Laura is a student whose life is slowly being ruined by junk food. More than 100 pounds overweight, she realizes her health and self-esteem are in tatters, and despite knowing she shouldn't, she fritters away the little disposable income she has on high-fat, high-sugar food that she sometimes doesn't even enjoy. Mike is intelligent, passionate, and talented. He's been trying to write a book for nearly 10 years. Somehow, he can never seem to muster enough motivation. He can't work undisrupted on any one task for more than a minute or two before his mind wanders to something more immediately satisfying. After a day of excuses, procrastination, and distractions, he's achieved absolutely nothing. In the moment, it seemed like the obvious choice to watch YouTube videos and read news articles instead of writing, but as his 40th birthday rolls around, he's hit with the sad realization that all these temporary amusements have amounted to nothing, and that his big dream is still just that, a dream. As you can see, knowing how to be patient, delay gratification, and moderate impulses is about so much more than just turning down a sweet treat here and there. As we'll explore in later chapters, the phenomenon of self-control, discipline, or curtailing impulsiveness is really about making brain changes that allow you to completely shift your mindset. It's arguable that a huge portion of what we call self-help and personal development is really just an attempt to master self-control, only in disguise. On a scale of 1 to 10, how well developed do you think your own self-discipline is? And if you don't give yourself a high score, what's standing in the way? Maybe it's society, which lays traps for you at every turn. Knowing that even if you do delay gratification, the rewards are not guaranteed and not always proportional. For example, you might pass on the cake today, and still be overweight in a year's time. You feel bad, depressed, or anxious, and that small moment of instant gratification literally feels like all you have going for you right now. Because life feels unfair and unpredictable, and if there's a way to succeed and do well, you worry that the rules are complex and not so straightforward. For example, what if restricting calories is actually making you gain weight? Is it even possible for people to lose weight? What's the right thing to do when there's so much conflicting advice out there anyway? Why delay satisfaction when you're not even sure that it will bring you any reward? You don't know when the reward will come, and that feels as good as never. Instant gratification, however, is conveniently right here in front of you. The fact that you don't really have faith in your own abilities and deep down don't believe that change is possible for you. Before reading any further, get a hold of a journal or diary where you can monitor your responses to certain questions and keep track of exercises you complete. Keep this journal private. Something you might be happy to learn is that Michel discovered that there were, in fact, easy ways to get his child study participants to wait just a little longer for the marshmallow. When the children sang songs, for example, thought about something else, or covered their eyes so that they couldn't see the marshmallow, they were able to wait longer. So there is hope. If we understand how our brains work, we can use practical tips and tricks to work around our limitations. Michel learned through his research that people tend to have better self-control when they have definite time frames, i.e., they know how long they have to wait to fulfill an impulse, and when these time frames are realistic. If you reread the above bullet list of all the reasons it's difficult to have self-discipline and then invert them, what you've done is create a roadmap leading you out of impulsivity. We can develop greater self-mastery by actively controlling our exposure to discipline-destroying aspects of our culture, choosing modest, realistic, and achievable goals that you have reason to believe you can actually reach, making sure that you're as calm, contented, healthy, and balanced within yourself so that you're never relying on the satisfaction of your impulses as your sole source of well-being. Making smart choices to manage unpredictability in the world and taking rational steps to control what you can. Setting your own goals so you can decide when and how frequently you experience a reaffirming reward. Building your self-confidence so that you can trust in your own ability and right to improve and be better, even if it takes time and effort. As you read on, you'll discover a wealth of different ways to achieve all of the above. Why even bother with self-discipline? You may wonder why we're dwelling so much on the benefits of self-discipline. Do you find yourself anxious to skip ahead in the book and start reading all the clever tips and tricks that will help you achieve your goals as quickly and easily as possible? Pause and just notice that impulse. It may, in fact, be a sign of lack of discipline. After all, this hunger for a quick fix is the same as a desire for immediate gratification. But if you notice this response in yourself, you'll see that what you're privileging is the reward, the satisfying outcome, and the fulfillment of a fleeting desire in the present. In impulsive moments, there's one thing you're not focusing on, the future. By dwelling on the benefits of self-discipline, you are refocusing your attention on a different pleasure, the bigger one that unfolds later. If you're staring at an enticing piece of chocolate cake, you may well convince yourself that nothing in the world would be nicer than having it there and then. But then, fast forward a few weeks, when staring at yourself in the mirror, and with the taste of chocolate cake long gone, you may start to realize that feeling healthy, lean, and happy in your own skin was actually worth a lot more to you. By focusing on the benefits of delayed gratification and greater self-discipline, You keep your eye on the bigger prize and put momentary pleasures into perspective. The brainstem is that primitive part of you that says, just do it. Now is all that matters. But the prefrontal cortex is the more evolved part that allows you to pause and say, your actions have consequences. How will your behavior in the present unfold? Is it what you want? Your wants and desires are not always an indication of the best possible action, and things that feel good right now are not necessarily good for you. The benefits of allowing your prefrontal cortex to step in and help you act with rational, conscious choice include better health. You won't be a slave to addictive, unhealthy foods, and you won't routinely take in more food than you need. So you spare yourself the health problems that come with overweight and obesity. You also lessen the chances of being addicted to other substances, caffeine, alcohol, nicotine, or recreational drugs, that rob you of your free will and undermine your quality of life. Better academic or work performance. A study by Duckworth and Seligman found that self-discipline was correlated with better educational outcomes in children, including better attendance and higher grades. Here, self-discipline was directly related to lower screen time and fewer distractions. For adults, Converse, Pathak, and DePaul found that greater self-control predicted increased pay and better prestige. Better relationships. Knowing how to regulate strong emotions, how to set aside your own desires and focus on others during listening, and how to be patient all lead to better interpersonal connections, whether that's with families, friends, or colleagues. Self-discipline means you're able to take responsibility for yourself while drawing good boundaries. Things like compassion and perspective-taking can only happen when we're able to voluntarily pause our own desires in the present and focus on other people. Just as short attention spans lead to shallow work, poor self-control in relationships leads to shallow and unsatisfying connections with others. Greater chance of achieving goals. Face it, in life, the most impressive and satisfying goals are never those that happen merely by accident. Rather, the things we most want to achieve take sustained effort over a long period of time. If we are constantly trapped in the present, distracted by momentary rewards, we never build the momentum for something greater, be that creating something unique, building a business, achieving a fitness or athletic goal, developing a new skill, or enduring the rigors of tertiary education. Better mental health. Those with good self-discipline trust themselves and have higher self-esteem and maturity. They feel more resilient because they know they're capable of holding their own in the face of distraction or temptation. Knowing how to anchor in your own will and self-regulate is a big part of being a well-rounded, mature adult. Less criminal behavior. This one goes without saying. Really, there's just one big benefit that comes from better discipline, and it's this: the ability to be in control of your own life. The satisfaction that comes with knowing that you are the driving force behind your thoughts, feelings, and actions, and not something external to you. Many of us think of self-discipline as a boring and difficult thing, almost like a punishment. We imagine a kind of internalized drill sergeant whose job in life is to make us unhappy and keep us away from what we really want. But we can reframe this and understand that self-discipline and self-control are actually the only means we have to creating more freedom for ourselves. Freedom to choose what we want our lives to be. Though it may take practice and some trial and error, being in command of ourselves is actually the happier, more balanced, and calmer state of mind. It is, deep down, the thing we really want, not the piece of cake or the quick fix or the distracting social media post. If we constantly remind ourselves of this fact, then we are constantly putting ourselves back in control and inviting our prefrontal cortex to make the final decision. In your journal, take a moment to think about the benefits you'd most like in the various areas of your life, such as health, relationships, etc. In what ways are you most ready to improve? What part of your life is crying out most for transformation? Willpower fatigue. Self-discipline is like a muscle. The more you exercise it, the stronger it gets. The stronger it gets, the easier it finds certain tasks, and what was once difficult eventually becomes easy. But self-discipline is also like a muscle in the sense that it can get worn out and depleted. It needs to rest, just like your muscles do. The strongest person in the world can spend their muscle strength in a hard training session and then be utterly weak until they rest up and recuperate. Any strength trainer will tell you, however, that resting your muscles and allowing them to recover is a big part of what makes them stronger in the long run, though. People tend to think of willpower as an all-or-nothing thing. We either have it or we don't. But willpower is best thought of as a tank that can fill and empty throughout the day and can be influenced by our choices and environment. A now famous study published by the National Academy of Sciences showed what happened when psychologists examined 1,112 judicial rulings. In these cases, a judge needed to decide whether a criminal should be released from prison on parole. The researchers were surprised to discover that the judge's choices appeared to be most influenced not by the unique cases in front of them, but by something else: the time of day. Namely, favorable rulings tended to be made 65% of the time if held in the morning, but chances of being granted parole would drop as the day wore on. After lunch, the positive ruling rate shot back up to 65%, but as the hours rolled by, this rate again dropped steadily downward until it was near 0% at the close of the day. It doesn't take a genius to guess why. The judges were simply getting tired. After lunch, somewhat refreshed, they were able to give the cases their full and impartial attention. But with each passing hour, their decision fatigue increased, and they made less charitable judgments. It didn't matter whether the crime was rape or murder or fraud. The pattern was consistent. It was as if the decision-making muscle of each judge was getting worn out and less able to function correctly as the day wore on. So, what we can conclude, other than that we should schedule our parole hearings for mornings if we can, is that the judges didn't exactly have high willpower or low willpower. Rather, they depleted what willpower they had. In the same way, that time you cheated on your diet last Tuesday doesn't mean you had low willpower. It just meant that your willpower current account was overdrawn that day. Perhaps it had already been spent on something else. So-called decision fatigue can also be understood as willpower fatigue. You can say no to the temptation once. That's one rep of your willpower muscle. And then say no to it again another dozen times later in the day. That's more reps. But come the evening, that poor willpower muscle is worn out. So you arrive home after a long, hard day and think, well, I've been so good. I deserve it. And you finally succumb to temptation. This is not unlike what weight trainers call muscle failure. You literally cannot use the muscle anymore. Crucially, your willpower muscle, your prefrontal cortex, is responsible for a lot of different jobs throughout the day, and spending all your will on one task means it's not available for another task. For example, you may have spent all day at work solving problems, making decisions, and resisting distractions. When you get home and it's time to go to the gym, though, you suddenly feel too tired, even though you've been sedentary for hours. You're not lazy. You really are tired. But what is exhausted is not your body, but your sense of willpower and self-control. Think of it as different currencies. You can spend dollars in one moment and euros and yen in the next, but ultimately it's all money, and you only have so much of it to spend. When was the last time your willpower failed? What time of day was it? What was the context? And what made it so difficult to maintain discipline at that moment when you had maintained it at other times? If you can't think of anything, stay alert all throughout today and notice how your sense of self-control waxes and wanes. How to protect your willpower. So, how do you cultivate and improve your own sense of self-discipline? Well, it's not by magically creating more willpower. That's impossible. Instead, it's by protecting and managing the willpower we do have. Here are a few simple ways to do that. Notice that in each case, you're not required to strong-arm your way through things and valiantly fight off temptation. Remember that you can only be strong for so long. You need a strategy that will still be in place for all those times your willpower muscle is fatigued and replenishing. Do the most important thing first. This is only logical. Prioritize the task that is most important and demands the most of you. Many people don't really lack willpower at all, but rather have just mismanaged their willpower and wasted it on the wrong thing. A good habit is to assign yourself just 3 things to do every day. Choose no more than 3 tasks that you're unwilling to leave unfinished by the end of the day. Ask yourself, which thing would, if completed, make me feel most satisfied and accomplished by the end of the day? Then do that thing first. You can tackle other less important ones later if you complete the important 3, but do not allow these secondary tasks to derail or distract you. For example, you might be the kind of person who is most energetic and alert at 11 a.m. every morning. You put a fence around your best 2 or 3 hours and dedicate this time and energy to your most important goals. Instead of tiring yourself out on boring, low-level work, you spend this time strategizing, creating, solving problems, or tackling the meatier issues. Give yourself fewer decisions. Plenty of self-help advice out there tells you to just decide to do it. Well, that's well and good, except you now know that the ability to decide is not infinite. Instead, treat your capacity for decision-making as a limited resource to guard. Reserve it for situations that genuinely need it most. The other stuff? You can put that on autopilot. If you can make something automatic, then you no longer have to make a decision about it. Or rather, you make a decision once and move on. For example, if you keep finding that the chore of deciding what's for dinner every day is depleting your willpower too much, then stop giving yourself that decision. Set up a meal order service. Get someone else to cook for you, or batch cook everything once a week and label your meals so you know ahead of time exactly what you're eating. No further thought required. It can be a waste of your time and energy to mull over improving your decision-making process. Instead, just stop making as many decisions. This is what schedules and habits are designed for, to take away your choice. You could deplete your willpower trying to decide whether you should do X or Y this evening. But if you have a schedule, you've already solved the problem. Just consult the schedule and do that. Don't beat yourself up. If you simplify your life, budget your willpower and energy, and make the right thing the simplest and most automatic thing, you can get pretty far. But even still, you will occasionally make a choice you later regret. We are all fallible, and perfection is not possible. This means we also need a strategy for dealing with inevitable slip-ups. The best strategy is not to fall into self-admonishment and despair, primarily because this approach will make you less likely to carry on. Rather, be compassionate with yourself. Recover as quickly as possible by accepting the mistake, then taking immediate action in the right direction again. For example, you may cheat on your diet and feel awful, but forgive yourself and make your very next decision a good one. Even better, allow your remorse to be put to good use and ask yourself why you failed and what you can do to be better next time. Remember, you'll always be most effective and a far better learner if you take shame and blame out of the equation. Make a to-do list for today's tasks, focusing on just 3 most important items, and do them all when you're feeling strongest. Notice how you feel. Chapter takeaways. To live a more disciplined life, we need to understand only 2 main principles. 1, be aware, and 2, take conscious action. Self-discipline has a biological and neurological basis, but though it starts there, it's not where it ends. Our decisions come down to opposing influences from our more primal and instinctual hindbrain and our higher prefrontal cortex. The degree to which we have self-control is the degree of connection between these 2 parts. Delayed gratification is the ability to delay the fulfillment of an impulse for immediate satisfaction in favor of a reward sometime in the future. It's an essential part of a self-disciplined life. By understanding the reasons you tend toward instant gratification, you can remove them. By focusing on the benefits of delayed gratification and greater self-discipline, you keep your eye on the bigger prize and put momentary pleasures into perspective. Of all the many benefits, the greatest is the real sense that you are in control of your own life, i.e., more freedom. Willpower is like a muscle. It builds with repeated use, but can get fatigued, so it needs to be replenished. Protect and manage your willpower by doing the most important tasks first, simplifying life so you have fewer decisions, e.g., automating or delegating, and quickly forgiving slip-ups when they happen. This has been the Self-Discipline Manual: How to Achieve Every Goal You Set Using Willpower, Self-Control, and Mental Toughness, written by Peter Hollins, narrated by Russell Newton. Copyright 2022 by Peter Hollins. Production copyright by Peter Hollins.